everyone. Welcome to the Historic Building Protection Design class. I'm Li Tianxin from Shenyang University of Technology. After studying the concept of historic building and the significance of protecting historic buildings, let's come to the second chapter, the development of historic building protection. In this chapter, we will learn from the following four aspects. Section 1, the concept of protection and restoration. Section 2, origin and development of protection and restoration. Section 3, the development of international historic building protection. In the last section, we will study the development of the historic building protection in our country. The formation of the concept and the method of historical heritage protection has undergone a long process of development. In the international background, this chapter focuses on how the historical cultural heritage protection is formed and developed, as well as the most basic objective, principle, and spirit of the protection, which is very important for us to study the protection and design of the urban historic buildings. Now, let's begin to learn the first section of this chapter, the concept of protection and restoration. It mainly starts from the concept of protection and the concept of restoration. Let's first look at a picture. You must be very familiar with it, the Colosseum of Rome. We have studied it in great depth in architectural history course. The first Roman Colosseum was built to please the triumphant warriors and to celebrate the great Roman Empire. After a very prosperous period, three very important protection and restoration works were carried out in the 19th century. After being abandoned as a quarry and turned into a Christian shrine in the 18th century, it can be said that the Roman Colosseum is itself a concentrated history of protection and restoration. People's understanding and definition of protection and restoration are changing and expanding with the development of the times. First, we learn the concept of protection. Let's sort out the definition of protection from several important documents issued by the international heritage community. The first was the Venice Charter, promulgated in 1964, the first international document protecting cultural buildings and historical sites. The concept of protection is aimed at the material level of heritage and is an engineering and technical act of resisting corrosion, which aims to preserve the heritage as material objects for as long as possible. The main measures are maintenance and restoration. International definition of protection, developed into the 1982 Charter for the Preservation of Quebec's Heritage, 1982. The concept of protection is more broadened in view of the development precondition to formulate protective measures and implement protection. The purpose of protection is to make the heritage available and be integrated into the life of the contemporary people. Protection is defined in the NARA document issued in 1994, a comprehensive exercise for understanding cultural heritage, understanding its history and meaning, ensuring its material safety, and ensuring its display, restoration, and improvement as required. The connotation of protection is more extended, and the utilization and display of heritage belong to the category of protection. To sum up, we can learn from several international charters. The concept of protection extends from the maintenance of the material level to the intangible level, and begins to pay attention to the spiritual relationship between heritage and human beings. Human beings should establish the relationship between human beings and heritage by understanding the intrinsic meaning of heritage. Now, let's take a look at the definition of protection in our country. Protection is defined in the Guidelines for the Protection of Chinese Cultural Relics and Monuments, formulated by the National Committee of China of the International Council on Monuments and Sites in 2002 as all activities for the preservation of the physical heritage of cultural relics and their historical environment, which can be understood as all activities for the protection of the architectural heritage body and its related historical environment, and for the preservation of their safe and good state. It is not only the engineering and technical intervention at the material level, but also the relationship between heritage and related environment in time and space. The purpose of protection is to preserve and extend the historical information and the whole value of cultural relics and monuments in a real and comprehensive way. From this concept, we have joined that the protection work of historic buildings is not only a simple maintenance work, but also involves the investigation, identification, evaluation, selection, and implementation of protection scheme, protection management, and other work, which is a systematic project. After learning about the concept of protection, let's come to the second concept of this section, restoration. Restoration can effectively continue the physical aspects of historic building body in the process of historic building protection. Technically, the protection of a building starts from the restoration, and the restoration history runs through the existence and the evolution of the building. In 19th century European restoration practices, the meaning and content of restoration are constantly changing, from stylistic restoration in France to anti-restoration campaigns in Britain to scientific restoration in Italy. The Venice Charter is the first international programmatic document with far-reaching influence. Article 9 definition: restoration is a highly specialized technique whose purpose is to completely protect and reproduce the aesthetic and historical values of cultural relics and buildings, which must be based on original materials and conclusive historical documents, and must not be speculated in the slightest sense. Any unavoidable addition must be distinctly different from the original architectural appearance and be seen as contemporary. This is the definition of restoration in the Venice Charter. At the same time, this passage reveals the basic ideas and principles of preservation and restoration of historic buildings, namely repairing old as old, replacing new as new, to transmit the historic buildings to the future generations in a true and complete way. This principle has always influenced architecture till today. Students should note that restoration is more of a work of art or a major historic building, and that restoration has become a controversial word. Thus, in the 1979 Baylor Charter, the term protection was used more as an alternative to restoration. In this section, we discussed the concept of protection and restoration from the international and domestic background, hoping that students can deeply understand and master its connotation.